If we're going to be honest with ourselves, short of those rather odd and very annoying folks who go out of their way cheerfully to drive a Prius, we all want something like this. And no, not because it's red or Italian, rather because of its heart, for the avoidance of doubt. Something that is 8 cylinders, powerful, and is usually loud and obnoxious. However, life has a very painful way of getting in the way, and this rarely becomes reality. That's why you and I have been following a trend as of late, where at least the heart of something like this is being transplanted into something a wee bit more practical. We start today with a bit behind the scenes. You see, I struggled greatly whether we needed to cover this engine again, being we talked about it, 2 weeks ago in a slightly different carrying case, but then realized it's never a bad idea to discuss very powerful, large engines, especially a 4-liter twin turbocharged V8 that puts out 500 horsepower and 568 pound-feet of torque. Then there's the business of the transmission. Anything you want as long as it's an 8-speed automatic. They call it a Tiptronic. That word should be reminiscent from older Porsche vocabulary, but what does that really mean? Well, it means that it's a transmission that has been supplied by ZF, but most importantly, it means a torque converter, so it's not a dual clutch unit like a 992 or a Panamera. That powers all 4 wheels. After all, this is an Audi, so it's a Quattro. There is a special differential that sends 60% of the power to the rear wheels, 40% of the power to the front wheels. Then there's what does all those numbers translate to in terms of reality? Well, it's an SUV, or sort of an SUV, so you'd think towing would be somewhat important. 7,700 pounds, but that's the same as the V6. And then there's performance figures, 0 to 60, 4.3 seconds, and VMAX, 155 miles an hour. All the same as the SQ7 with the same engine. So here's a fun fact. This weighs 33 pounds more than the slightly larger SQ7 we have already driven. So that means 5,324 pounds or 2,414 kilograms. With that, a little hesitation goes away real quick. Yeah, it's still as quick as the SQ7, so much we gotta scrub some speed. But let's get back on it as we still have some incline ahead of us. And this is where the Audi derivation of this engine really stands out. Yes, linear power delivery, and it sounds glorious in the process. However, it's really usable from about 2,500 RPM all the way up to about 5,000 RPM. Now translated, what does that mean? Well, it becomes a significantly more usable tool in a vehicle of this size. Like the engine, the suspension is a virtual carbon copy of the SQ7, and in that episode, you and I went on a very deep tech dive of all the chassis control systems underneath the vehicle. Highly suggest you check that out. Here we need to cover the differences. And the first stop is, what is a Q8? Well, it's based on the same MLB Evo platform. Don't know where they came up with that name, kind of mixing metaphors if you ask me. But that underpins, obviously, the Q7, the Q8, the Bentley, the Lamborghini, and of course, the Porsche Cayenne. Well, in the Audi world, they don't really change it much. The wheelbase is exactly the same between a Q7 and a Q8, or an SQ7 or an SQ8. It's the length that's different. This one is 2 inches shorter, and then obviously the practicality of the D-pillar, where they pilfer the design from an Audi Sport Quattro back in the day. I think that's a bit of a stretch, but it looks cooler. And then there is one other difference, and that is the wheel sizing. What you're looking at here is a 21-inch wheel, which is the only thing on offer in an SQ7. However, in the SQ7, the 21-inch wheel is much more attractive than this one. However, you can fix that because there's something called an S-line package in an Audi SQ8 where it changes some other stuff, but most importantly, it upsizes the wheel to 22 inches and changes the design, transforming the look of the vehicle. Now, for you and I to have a substantive discussion in driving dynamics, we need to make one adjustment here. Let's go over to comfort and then put the hammer down. And what you notice immediately is a significant amount of squat back there. Yes, in comfort mode, but I would argue more noticeable here than in the SQ7. And then if you push harder going into turns, there's a little bit more float here. I can't say I really noticed that in the SQ7. I wouldn't be surprised if it was there too. However, there is a way to clean this up. We go down to dynamic. Would love a knob there, that'd be great. And then get on it harder, and there is, it doesn't just clean it up, transforms the car to the point where it's more than just adjustable suspensions that are at play here. It transforms the character of the car, where you almost don't think you're in a 5,300 pound vehicle. This is where I, a 6-footer, would sit. Yet I cannot honestly determine if it's either a figment of my imagination or the fact that this SQ8 has the exact same wheelbase as an SQ7, and that combined with the fact that this does not have a third row, which makes this feel like there's more room back here, even to the point where there's some adjustability. I can even add some privacy at the touch of a button. However, it's not all puppy dogs and roses. In the back, the combination of the 2 less inches in length and the swoopier, fancier looking D-pillar translates to 10 less cubic feet of storage. Now, it doesn't sound like a lot, but where the rubber meets the road, I can introduce you to a 65-pound, 13-year-old white husky that is A, very fluffy, and B, very fickle. He was not pleased by the 10 less cubic feet. This car, unlike that SQ7 we recently drove, has the Sport package, which means we can go into turns, push much more aggressively, and we are not going to fall over onto the side. That is because of the active suspension, and here it does make a significant difference. I would argue what's happening here is there's a translation from all of the high-tech 48-volt suspension control underneath the vehicle to your brain, and in turn your brain is processing that you can push this a bit more aggressively. Is it a canyon carver? No, but it is highly competent when driving aggressively in town. Yes, it is indeed that time again to play your favorite game of mine, the options game, with today's contestant, yet another Audi. However, this one much more fancy, the Audi SQ8, and as a result has a little bit more dear of a base price at $89,000. Would like to point out this is a 2020 model year vehicle. Most of them will be 2021 model year vehicles because the 2020 will be an abbreviated run, and as a result they will be $200 more in base price. Don't shoot me, I'm just the messenger. To that we add Daytona Gray Pearl. I would not choose this color. I would choose the Matador Red that we had in the SQ7, or they have this stunning blue metallic that really makes this satin finish aluminum come off the page, which is fitted as standard on the S models of the Q8 and the Q7. But either way, if you go with the blah gray or the stunning red or blue, $595. To that we add RS Red, which is the interior, and that is a much needed contrast when one chooses a very uncreative color like gray. Thankfully, the RS Red in the interior is $0. To that we add the Sport package. This is something very important and we did not have on the SQ7. This is the red brake calipers, not a huge thing, and then the Sport Quattro differential, where we can send the torque to either side of the rear wheel, makes a huge difference in handling, and then most importantly, the active anti-roll bars that control the pitch of a very heavy vehicle. Well worth it at $5,900. To that we add a Prestige package. Think of this as a way of gussing up the vehicle. For example, the headlights become a bit more fancy. You don't have to slam the doors because they're a soft close type, and there's power sunshades in the back. But the things that really stand out is the driver's assistance package, and most importantly to me, the head-up display. Well worth it at $5,500. To that we add the carbon vector inlays in the dash. That is $500. I would do something else, we'll talk about that later. And then the most important option that was fitted in the SQ7 and fitted in this one as well, the B&O sound system. Absolutely well worth it. I would argue almost better than the Burmester and the Mercedes and the Porsche. $5,000. To that, we add a destination and handling from Bratislava, Slovakia of $995 for a total retail price of $107,490. Since you and I drove that SQ7, did a bit more digging on configuring one of these things. It turns out here one can opt for wood as an option as opposed to this carbon fiber inlay we just discussed. Now the carbon fiber here does look pretty good. I'm usually not a carbon fiber fan. Here I'll give it a pass because it looks real. However, there is a grayish wood that is on offer. I would argue that's the way to go. The only downside to it, it's only on offer in a high gloss. And I've seen Audis with a satin finish wood absolutely stunning. Here's what I'm thinking. If there were an option for a satin finish wood, I'm not saying just gray, maybe some other colors, and it were here, as well as on the doors and the back, that would go a long way to transforming this interior, maybe lightening it up, especially with the unusual choice of a red interior. I'd like to make an additional request. The seats are fantastic. Many adjustments. Most of them are down here. However, there is a trend nowadays where they're not only burying items in the screen that have nothing to do with the seats, we're starting to get some of the seat controls buried into the seats. Here's an example. I go here, and then I go into vehicle here. And notice, you can't do this while you are driving. Obviously, they black it out, but let's say for the sake of discussion, I have nobody behind me here. We'll pull over, and now the seats are available, and to make the finer adjustments of the side bolsters as well as the thigh support, I have to go into the screen to change this. This is not a good idea. Can we put it on the side of the seat or maybe over on the door? Let's put it in one place, and I think that would be wunderbar and significantly safer. Other than that, the seats, magnificent. Okay, so you and I kicked off today's episode with a bit of a gag, but in reality it was not that far of a stretch. You see, most equations like this have a 3.99 something twin turbo V8, which is exactly what's going on over there, and for the same reasons, to escape tax or CO2 emission schemes around the world. But that is not what's important here. What's important is the age-old question of practicality versus aesthetics. And what we learned in the SQ7 episode, that's practical, but that one in this pantheon of this new trend of powerful SUVs von Deutschland is a bit of a bargain against, say, an X5M or a Cayenne GTS or a Cayenne Turbo. This got all the same things going for it, but someone who likes to package a lot of dogs in their cars, like me, or a lot of people, I would argue the SQ7 is the way to go. Aside from that, they both can do the exact same job.